Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing. Okay. Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing. 1, 2, 3, testing. Scott, I'm not sure if you're online. I know I've just let you into the waiting room. If you're there, could you maybe indicate you wish to speak and just let us test the system.
Timing, please. Thank you. Okay, members, welcome to a special meeting of full council. Can I please ask everyone to please mute their microphones online at all times unless invited to speak by myself. If we can just go through our apologies. Apologies have been received from Councillor Robley Alexander and Deputy Mayor Councillor Kyle Savage. Can I check if we have any further apologies, please? I'm going to bring in Councillor Evans.
Yes, Gordon Kennedy is an apology as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. I'm going to bring in Councillor Lavery next.
Councillor Ferguson's an apology as well.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Members have no further lights on. Can I check if we have any declarations of interest, please? Okay, I don't see any lights on for that, but please do feel free to declare these. Okay, I'm going to bring in Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just you'll be aware that I have 2 family members that work for NIE, so a non-pecuniary interest.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Okay then, members. Today, if you look outside, it's a beautiful, calm spring evening, so the chaos of Storm Éowyn feels like a distant memory. But the impact it had on the communities that we serve was very real. So for that reason, members wish to convene this special council meeting with NIE and Fibrous to understand the challenges that arose, highlight the efforts that were made and ensure that we build greater resilience for the future. We're extremely grateful here this evening that we have both NIE and Fibrous online. NIE are going to present first, and following that, members will have the opportunity to ask questions and to make comment. So with all that said, I'm now going to introduce the NIE staff that we have online with us tonight. Adele Creary, Rodney Ballantyne, Christine Kelly, Peter McClenaghan, and I'm now going to hand over to Adele then to do the presentation. Adele, can I just get you to request to come in, please?
Does that work?
Yes, we can hear you, Adele. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start again. So good evening, everyone. I'm Adele Creary, Director of Customer and Operations in NIE Networks. And thank you to the Council, first of all, for a very kind invitation to present to you all this evening. In terms of the team with me here today, Rodney Ballantyne is our Senior Manager who led the restoration efforts in the ABC Council area. He's what we call a Local Incident Centre Manager for Craigavon. Christine Kelly, who many of the team the council members will have worked with previously, is our Customer Relations Manager, and Peter McClenaghan is our Head of Communications and External Engagement. So today we plan to take members through some slides setting out how we prepare for storms, how the borough was impacted from an electrical perspective by the storm, and how we've responded. And we'll also talk at the end about what we're doing to consider our approach to storms into the future. But before we start all of that, on behalf of NI Networks, I really wanted to express my thanks to ABC Council. That's everyone from the senior leadership team, the council officers, councillors and elected representatives, right through to the community groups and their volunteers. It was really reassuring for us to see your emergency plans and operations, and at all times we felt that we were working alongside some really experienced and knowledgeable people that we could rely on. So thank you for that. In a situation like Storm Éowyn, our priority at NI Networks is to get power restored safely to every customer as quickly as we can. And we understand, though, the challenges even a short loss of power means to everybody, but in particular our farmers, those living in rural areas, and vulnerable people in our communities, including the sick and the infirm. So there was a huge amount of work carried out by you and your teams at all hours of the day and at night to support those customers. And we really, in the eye of that storm, appreciated your input. And I wanted to particularly commend the work of Glenn Ferry and Joe McCafferty, who we relied on throughout the storm. I'd also like to extend our thanks to the Lord Mayor and some of the elected representatives that visited our teams during and after the event. The storm is a really challenging thing for all of our employees, people in the contact centres and the control rooms, through to the teams on the ground. And that support that was shown by council representatives was really welcomed and certainly helped our teams to carry on. So thank you for that. So in terms of tonight, I'll hand over to Peter McClenaghan first to take us through some of the slides in terms of our preparation, and then Rodney will talk about some of the more technical aspects. So Peter, over to you.
Peter, can I just check you're not on mute? Peter, I'll just get you to indicate to come back in, please. Peter, can I just get you to come? Oh, yes, that's you in now. Thank you.
Yes, perfect. Brilliant. Sorry. So my apologies for that. Thank you so much for having us. Yes, I've been with NIE since September of last year when I joined from the Consumer Council. And in that time, I've been involved in 3 storm incidents with NIE. Obviously, Storm Éowyn was by far the most severe. We have a comprehensive plan for storm incidents, and I've seen that practiced now on a number of occasions. We begin well ahead of a storm event. So in the week leading up to Storm Éowyn, as the announcements were made by the Met Office that we were forecast strong winds, and we put our emergency plan in place. And that means we escalate our field teams. We begin engagement with civil contingencies groups, which include obviously the council themselves. We establish our local incident centres. 12 of the incident centres across Northern Ireland, and Rodney will take you through a little bit more detail on what that entailed in Craigavon in a little while. We suspended our planned maintenance and began to request additional resources for partners across these islands, so that as the incident arose, we knew that extra support would be available. And we did things such as establish a second call contact centre in Belfast to deal with the significant influx of customer contacts we knew would be arising. All that said, the storm was really significant. And moving on to the next slide, you can see an image of our fault reporting system. So this is publicly available information, and anybody who was contacting us during the storm would have had information in relation to the faults on the system. We had nearly 2,700 faults on the system as a result of the storm, and to put that in context, that was about 3 times the number of faults on the system that we suffered during Storm Dara earlier in the year. So what did that mean in real terms for people? So moving on to the next slide, 326,000 customers across Northern Ireland experienced interruption to their supply. That's about a third of the total customer base that we serve. So a really significant number of people. In order to deal with that, we had over 2,500 people involved in storm response, and that was at its widest scale. NIE staff, contractor staff, and mutual aid staff from overseas. That meant 1,000 people out in the ground undertaking work, and most of our staff redeployed doing storm related activity. Everyone in NIE has a secondary role, and in a storm incident, everyone steps up into that role and plays that escalation role through the period of the event to ensure that we're restoring people as quickly as we can. So then moving on, and Adele has mentioned what our priorities are when it comes to severe weather. And first, and hopefully understandably, the prime thing we're looking out for is public safety, making sure that we're promptly responding to incidents of potential safety issues. In relation to Storm Éowyn, in the first hours of the storm, because it was a red weather warning, we had our teams escalated on site in their at home or in their local incident centre locations. But until the red weather warning was issued, was lifted, we weren't able to get out on the ground to even address those public safety risks. But as soon as the red weather warning was lifted, we were straight out on the ground to address those issues and concerns. Our second priority then is information provision, making sure that customers, where possible, have clear information in relation to the impact of the storm on them and their homes and businesses. And then thirdly, and obviously, it's getting people back on power as quickly and efficiently as possible. And we do that through a prioritization. So we prioritize public safety first, as I've mentioned. Then we prioritize the transmission faults on the network, so things that threaten the security of the whole system. We then look to restore the major lines and substations first. So those network areas that can get the largest groups of homes and businesses back on power first. And then we work down through the network and connect people on the smaller lines where there are less customer numbers. And obviously that means we get the majority of customers on quickly, but that does mean that people in more rural areas are left off power for that little bit longer. But hopefully you understand the rationale for that. We received a huge number of customer communications during Storm Éowyn. The first day of the storm, we received 70,000 customer contacts. To put that in context, in a given month, we would normally receive less than 20,000 customer contacts in a full month. So that's why we escalated over 120 staff to deal with those calls. Everybody who phoned into our call centre was captured in our high volume contact answering service. We had a log of all those calls. We also received 96,000 digital messages over the period of the storm. Over the storm, we also received over 2 million views on our PowerCheck app, people trying to find out information from us in relation to the storm. So obviously, in the first days of the storm initially, and understandably, that was a huge volume for us to answer. By the Monday of the storm, we were actually responding with a warm voice to each individual who was able to call through to us. So hopefully that gives you an overall picture of the impact of the storm, what it meant on a Northern Ireland basis, and on how we dealt with that in a Northern Ireland context. And just moving on to the final slide that I'm going to talk you through. In the context of what essentially was a hurricane, we had that significant work to do. We understand completely the individual impact, as Adele said, on individual homes and businesses, and undertook a significant amount of work to support vulnerable customers in that regard. We were proactively making contact with customers who we knew were in difficult circumstances. There was 1,400 vulnerable customers that we were proactively contacting in order to provide them additional information during the storm event. And in that context, and addressing the large volume of customers initially and getting people back on power initially, we managed to restore 65% of customers within 24 hours, and within the 10 days that we initially forecast and communicated to people, we had everyone restored and back on power. Rodney now is going to talk to you a little bit more about the local detail of the Craigavon area. Rodney's patch covers most of Craigavon, and he'll talk you through that now.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, Rodney, I'm going to bring you in.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you. This slide shows it's 3 video clips. And thank you very much for the opportunity to share some of the activities that we went through over the 10 days of Storm A1. So this slide shows 3 individual video clips. The first one on the left, if you want to click the play button, is from a drone footage from Gosford Forest Park. And as you can see, and you're basically, the back of the drone is basically the Margaret Hill Road, and it's now gone up to the Tandragee Road, and you can see in the middle of all that, and there is an overhead line that we had to rebuild on the back of the damage that A1 did to the forest park. And as you can see, the forest park is like completely devastated. This is us now at the Tandragee Road. You may recognize it, and it will turn back down and fly back down again to let you see another look at it. And it's something that we are actively working with the forestry department to understand what can be done to minimize the impact of the trees on our network, because as you can see, the complete, well, it was a hurricane. It caused complete devastation to the forest park. I think that's maybe it coming to the end shortly. If you want to stop that one and even go to the next one, this is helicopter footage. We brought in 6 helicopters, and within the helicopter, we have a trained observer, and they have access to our network maps. So when they see damage to our network, or trees in our line, or conductors down, or poles broken, they can send that in to us in the LIC in real time. And we can then identify from the map, from the information they give us, the size of pole, the conductor type, and get those materials basically arranged to get out on site to improve and speed up the restoration activities. And then the last one is a little clip that this shows the Friday 1 week in, and we're down now to restoring the supply to one customer who is affected by this fault. And because of the level of damage in the trees and the conductors that are wrapped in around those trees, we had to use that crane to lift that digger into a customer's garden to restore their supply. And that one fault took 8 men, 12 hours to restore one customer, plus a crane, plus a track digger. So at that stage, when we're down to individual one-offs, it's just trying to show you to some extent that the level of sort of intensive labor that it takes to get one customer back on. Next slide, please. And this, I was one of 12 LICs that kicks into place whenever we have a storm escalation. The graph or the map on the left shows the weather forecast at 7 a.m. on the morning of Friday, the 24th of January. And as you can see there, the patch that's of Northern Ireland that is covered by Craigavon LIC, i.e. my patch, was just getting the worst of the storm at 7 o'clock. By 10 o'clock, the winds were down to about 60 mile an hour, but at 7 a.m. we were up there getting gusts of 87 miles per hour across the high ground around Katy, Derryness direction. Next slide, please. And then just a subset of our Craigavon LIC specific numbers. We had 351 faults in total due to the storm, 115 HV faults due to the storm. Now, just to put that into perspective, on a normal day across all of Northern Ireland, on average, we get 6 HV faults per day across the whole of Northern Ireland. And little old Craigavon LIC at 115 in one morning. We managed to get 57% of our customers back on within 24 hours. And as Peter mentioned earlier, fault restoration activities started straight after the red warning period ended. So realistically, practically, we were getting guys out in the ground from 3 o'clock. But those activities on the Friday afternoon were basically making things safe, taking conductors, isolating conductors and getting them off the road, helping to get trees off roads so that the traffic could flow, and real restoration repairs didn't actively start until the Saturday. On the Friday night, we got faulted sections isolated and restored customers, but repairs didn't start until daylight on Saturday. We were with 35,000 customers within Craigavon patch affected. Now that we have 87,000 customers within Craigavon LIC operational area, so about 40% of them were affected due to the storm. Next slide, please. And this graph, hopefully you can see it. This graph sort of shows the profile of customers off. And if you don't mind, I'll just spend a few moments on that. So at the very, very bottom axis, on the y-axis, is basically time. And that starts at midnight on Friday the 24th, or 00 hours on Friday the 24th. And we had basically nobody off. If you remember, it was very, very calm. And then the storm came in, and our first customer within Craigavon went off supply about 01:30 in the morning. And by 1300 on Friday, we were up to just under 20,000 customers off supply. And then as we started to get out onto the ground and started to isolate the faults, and then we were able to restore the non-faulty sections of each of those circuits, we started to get customers back on supply. And so by about 10 o'clock on the Friday night, we were down to 14,000 customers still off supply. And you'll see there that horizontal line, approximately at 14,000 off. That was because of the damage. We knew we were into a multi-day event. So our aim that night and every other night was to try and get our operational staff home and off the network at approximately 10 o'clock at night, to get them back in again for 7 o'clock in the morning, to get them back out again for 8 o'clock at daylight. And so as you can see, that first night, there was no change in our activity or the number of customers that we got restored, because we had people off the network. And then you can see, as every night, there's a little bit of that graph that is basically flat. And if you look down at the y-axis, you'll see that little flat bit aligns with the hours from 2200 to 0600 in the morning, when basically we weren't out there. And then you can see each day the number of reduces. Those little spikes every now and again are when another fault appeared when we were undertaking restoration activities to restore customers. And as you can see, then it just reduces until We had our last customer back on supply in Craigavon LIC at late on Monday, the 3rd of February. Next slide, please. And then again, just 3 more pictures, photos taken back from the guys. The first one showing a very significant tree down, an ore conductor wrapped around it, and the repair activities ongoing as we restring that conductor. And then the guys took a sunshade shot that's out in Gosford Park as well, when the guys were basically finalising that restoration to get that circuit back put up. Next slide, I think that might be me. Yep, that's me. Probably hand back to Adele now. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. I'm going to bring Adele back in.
Can you hear me okay?
I can indeed, yes.
Okay, so look, members, after every storm, we carry out a review of our storm activity, what went well and how could things be even better. And for this particular one, we've established a special project team to consider Storm Éowyn, and we've made it a strategic priority within our business to consider how we can do things differently. That will be everything from looking at our network resilience, looking at how we communicate with our customers, how we interact with external agencies, and how we digitise and use technology to speed things up. We're conscious this is a very big meeting, and we welcome the input of council and councillors as we carry out that review. So anyone who would like to discuss their experience with us, there's an open door. We'd happily meet with you in your own premises or within ours, and happily take on board some of your feedback. So thank you for your time this evening, and we're happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Adele. And thank you to Peter and Rodney as well for the presentation. Adele, you mentioned Councillor Nelson and I visiting the NIE office last month to say thank you in person, and that was a real eye-opener for us, just to see how much effort and teamwork went in behind the scenes during and after the storm. So I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you for the continued engagement with Council and with our local communities as well. Members, I'll now open the floor for questions, and I believe I have Councillor Nelson in first.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and can I thank the presenters here with us this evening. I mean, look, I'm going to hold my hands up. I am incredibly biased. My brother and husband both work for NIE. I've seen firsthand the long hours that were put in by staff across the board in NIE, both in the call centres, the dangerous conditions that many of the engineers went out to, but also as well appreciated the huge partnership approach with people like Christine turning up to some of our support meetings for members of the community. And so it was a real honour for you and I, Lord Mayor, to visit NIE and thank staff personally, and also to get an insight into what it's like over there. I suppose just from my point of view as a councillor, one of the things that really stood out for me was the support teams that NIE deployed to visit the homes of the vulnerable, to bring them packs. So there was things like warmers, there was water, but even just that check-in was really, really appreciated. And anytime I asked for that, you know, people were out within a matter of hours. I was never off the phone to the call handling teams, and they were so patient, because I'm sure it was hard on them. And I know as well that some of the phone calls that they were getting from residents who were very distressed had to have been very hard for them to hear as well. I also really appreciated the WhatsApp support. There was a WhatsApp established at the time, and it was at times then that wee bit quicker, maybe just to get an update, than always phoning in, or sometimes you maybe felt you phoned in too much. So the WhatsApp was really good, so I really appreciated that. So look, I just think NIE shone at a very dark time. I think their information was up to date, and it was very easy to get through to someone, either by phone or WhatsApp, and you got callbacks. suppose if Christine's here with us tonight, we'll all have interacted with Christine over the years, and just when we have the opportunity to thank her, because she is brilliant whenever we reach out around an issue. She's very, very forthcoming and helpful. I suppose, Adele, I was just going to ask about any learning, but I know that that process is underway, and so I suppose then we can await that. I suppose my only thing that I would probably love you to look at is, and I understand the idea around prioritising high voltage areas where there's multiple people out, but sometimes that did frustrate the rural areas, some of which I represent. So I suppose definitely understand the logic behind that, but also if there was some way to then maybe in partnership with council give a wee bit of extra support then in rural areas. But all in all, thank you for everything that you did through the storm.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Adele, would you like to come back in if you want to indicate? Okay, that's you.
Yeah, no, thank you for the comments and for that feedback, and that's all very welcome. And yes, as part of the review that we'll carry out, we'll take on board some of those comments. It's very difficult set of circumstances that we're working in when there is a storm situation, and it's that balance between trying to get quite often very vulnerable customers back on supply and balancing that off against huge swathes of numbers as well through high voltage faults. The teams on the ground, Rodney and co, will know their areas and will try and deploy resources to do the best that they can. But I suppose just the nature of this particular event was so difficult, and that's why it took longer than any of us would have hoped. But no, thank you for that, Councillor.
Thank you, Adele. I'm going to bring in Councillor Lavery next.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I just want to put my thanks on record from my own grouping regarding the work of all of NIE staff over that incredibly difficult period, and went on, as the presenters have said, for many weeks after, and continue to do so, as they're looking forward ahead to potential other scenarios in future. As been pointed out by Councillor Nelson, I have to give a real mention to those call handlers who were, as I think Rodney went through, handling huge amount of calls, many from vulnerable people in very difficult scenarios. When they lost their electric, they lost a lot of their support network. The way in which they were able to deal with a lot of my constituents in a very compassionate, caring manner stood out, as well as I think Rodney as well touched on about the huge and long hours staff were working round the clock to even help with single faults at a time in some of those rural areas. So I think NIE did come out of it in a very impressive situation, albeit there's potential issues to look in the future. And also I remember seeing the news articles at the time where staff from other regions or other areas were coming in and helping out here in Northern Ireland, and then Northern Ireland staff were helping out elsewhere as well when some of the faults were restored here. I do just have two queries, I think, for Adele. One was sort of touched on, like a list of vulnerable customers. Is there any when NA could look into doing some kind of communications exercise whereby people who are or would qualify for that vulnerable list are notified, so that they can make sure they're on any potential list, so if similar issues and storms do happen in future, they're able to be identified and resolved quicker. Because I know some people who were contacting me weren't maybe realised they could be on that vulnerable list and receive those calls those house calls that Councillor Nelson was talking about. So just a query regarding that vulnerable list, and if it could be updated and communicated by NIE. And the second is, I know there's some talk at the time regarding the potential compensation scheme, which wasn't being able to be implemented in Northern Ireland for certain reasons, but was able to be implemented, and I think in Scotland and maybe some other places. Does NIE have any sort of comments, or is that something that will be formed as part of their consideration exercise, which I think Adele touched on? So those two queries, Lord Mayor, just regarding the list of vulnerable customers, and then the sort of conversations around potential compensation scheme in future years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. I think Peter is maybe going to answer that.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, so just to come back on both your points in relation to the vulnerable customer list, we routinely undertake messaging to try to encourage people to get themselves on that list. Obviously, during a storm period, it's very difficult if people aren't already on the list. It's difficult for them to make contact with us and do that. So we are very aware of the need to be proactive in that regard, and we will be running again ahead of next winter a campaign for awareness of that list, and we will share that with yourselves in council and encourage you to onward share that, and that would be really fantastic for us. We'd really welcome you doing that. What I would highlight though is that that vulnerable customer list enables us to identify those people who are really in critical need and provide them extra support. And it's been mentioned that we had 100 of our meter reading team out on the ground providing support to people in that regard. We had our staff in some of your local centres as well, assisting customers. There is further engagement I think we can do with yourselves as a council and with the wider civil contingencies network though, about how over time we better develop provision for vulnerable people and how we better share information with them and share their information between agencies. And that's something that we're currently discussing with the utility regulator and other partners in the utility companies and the Consumer Council, because it's something we're aware that can be developed over time, and there are real challenges there at the minute about exactly what information we can share about customers to get them the support they need. And not all of that support is something that NIE networks can deliver ourselves. We do need to rely on and depend on our civil contingencies partners like yourselves. So it's really important that collectively we undertake that work in the coming months and years. In relation to compensation, we, after the event, were involved in quite detailed and deep discussions for a number of weeks with both the utility regulator and the Department for the Economy in relation to the, the request for compensation. Essentially, there was no regulatory mechanism for compensation that existed in Northern Ireland. It meant we weren't able to make compensation payments. Compensation payments, if they were made in future, would likely have to be levied off the wider customer base, and in that instance there might be a cost to all customers in order to compensate those individuals who were off power. Because of that, those discussions with the Department of the Economy and the regulator found that for this incident it just wasn't possible to make compensation payments, and we worked through the detail of that. What will happen though is the utility regulator will be undertaking a consultation in relation to potential future support schemes for customers, how that would be funded, how that would be paid for by all customers on behalf of individuals who are affected. It's likely that that could mean additional costs on customer bills if the regulator and the department and the public at large were to support that. And that's something that we will be actively engaging with when the regulator undertake that consultation. And my understanding is that that will be coming in probably before summertime. That consultation will be published.
Thank you, Peter and Councillor Lavery. I trust that answers your question. I'm going to bring in Alderman Greenfield next, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to each one for the presentation tonight. It's just important that we do thank those who were working hard through this very difficult time. I think as we drive around our roads, even at the moment, and we go, or even some of our parks, we still see the devastation of the amount of trees down. So it certainly was a massive task to get everyone back on. And so I want to put on record our thanks to all those in the team. We had friends that work in it, and certainly some things that maybe we didn't think about was they were going home some nights with no electric and have been out for quite a number of days after listening to so many phone calls all day. So we do want to make sure that is recorded and to go forward. There was a comment on one of the slides there about the hadn't been a storm like this since 1998. I just wonder how quickly we got everything on this time compared to them. I'm not sure if that's something that we would know, but I suppose my main point of it really is it was not a criticism such, but it was something that did seem to come up time and time again, was the fluctuation in dates. As a local representative, we could phone in and got great communication back and forth, but sometimes we had to update the date. Maybe those constituents had contacted us, and the dates that they had been given the day before were possibly sooner than the dates we were given the day after and stuff. So just something maybe for the future. I know there's probably a big push, people wanting communication, and I think it's very important, but it's just the fluctuation sometimes could create on even more unrest with some of those involved in it. So it's just that point as we move forward, maybe there's thinking of what could be done better in the future. I don't know how you would do it. I know it was a massive task, but it's also to put in record of thanks to those who did attend over at the hub. As I say, it was very good to be there and with other colleagues and see your staff there and working so well with folks. You know, the other points that I was going to mention were already been raised about the vulnerable list. So just again, Lord Mayor, thank you for letting me in, and thank you for all the work that's been done to the staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Greenfield. Members, I have a list of speakers in front of me here, and we still have Fibrous to get a presentation from, so if I can request that we are brief from here on in, please. I think I'm going to bring someone back in from NIE to maybe answer those queries. If you can just indicate, I'll bring you back in. Okay, Peter, thank you.
Thanks. Yes, so we're conscious that for some customers, our estimated restoration times weren't 100% accurate. I think overall we were pretty confident that our ATR's estimated restoration times were accurate for the vast majority of customers, but completely understand that where customers were given a time that then wasn't maybe met or changed, that would have been stressful and difficult, and we will be looking to ensure that our data in that regard improves in the next storm, and that's something we would be really welcome. Councillors, if you have specific instances of that where you know that there was significant change in those times, please do let us know. I think on the broader point around estimated restoration times, we sought to publish that information early, and we did so for a very specific reason. We knew, as Rodney said earlier, that this was a multi-day event. This was going to impact a lot of people for quite a prolonged period, and as we knew that on the first day of the storm, we met with the First and Deputy First Minister to let them know that information. And we then took the decision to publish that 10-day time frame. And we did so because we knew that people would have to make their own plans in their own homes for how they would cope without power for a period of time. And that is obviously a really difficult message to give to people. It's not pleasant to be told how long you're going to be without power, but we felt it was really the transparent and responsible thing to do, because it did make it more it did enable people to make decisions as to whether they wanted to stay in their own home for the period they would be off power, or they would make alternative arrangements, perhaps stay with relatives. So we felt that that was important to do. We think that that was, on the whole, something that was successful, but we appreciate that in certain instances that maybe that information wasn't 100% accurate, and we appreciate that that is something that would have been very challenging for individual customers. So, like I say, if you're aware of specific instances where there were significant fluctuations in that timeline for people, please do flag those to us after the event, because that would be something we would really appreciate understanding and knowing about.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that. I'm going to bring in Councillor O'Dowd next, please.
Thank you, Chair. There was just one. There was a few wee points, but I'm not going to bring them up tonight. Is there any chance we could get an email address for the best person to contact? With any queries and that we have?
Okay, I think Adele's going to answer that.
Yes, we'll send something into council for you to share with your members, and we can answer questions on a case by case basis in the interest of time.
Okay, thank you, Adele, for clearing that up. I'm going to bring in Councillor McElrath next.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to the team in Adele. I will be brief. Lord Mayor, listen, all that's been said has been said or needed to be said in terms of thanks and all the work that went in through an unprecedented period of time and an event that caused huge damage to our power network and so on. One wee thing I will say, just to the team, and I'm sure they know this anyway, an instance like this, the same with the flooding instance we had and the storm back a while as well. We become like many call centres as councillors, as elected reps. So the passage of information to constituents, if the clearer that can be, the better. And I suppose one wee learning exercise out of this is from NIE, if that passage of information to elected reps, if that could be looked at, reviewed, and see how we can get really accurate information, or as accurate as we can, because we can disseminate that quite quickly to our community groups, to people. I represented an area, that a huge rural area from the Birches to almost Tandragee to across to Loughall, where there's huge numbers of rural dwellers without power, and still 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe even in some cases into the 10th day, there was a number of my constituents still offline. Those first few days, I think everybody kind of realised we were in the situation we were in. It was going to take some time to sort the network out. But when we got to day 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on, and still a lot of people still off, and still the passage of information wasn't great. And they talk about storm chasers. I was like an NIE chaser, and when I got some of the engineers on the ground, actually, I learnt much more from them as to what was happening, and was able to relay that to constituents as to actually calling in. And if we could maybe look at maybe trying to maybe navigate that some way, that elected reps, particularly councillors who maybe have a huge sway of the constituents off, that passage of information is maybe slightly better. But on the whole, I mean, it was a huge recovery operation, and a huge word of thanks to the engineers in particular that were on the ground. So that's my tuppence worth, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to bring in Adele.
We'll look at that, and I just also want to say a huge thank you to the councillors who were fielding those calls over that period of time. I know you were working day and night on our behalf, so we appreciate all that you did there, so thank you.
Thank you, Adele. I'm going to bring in Councillor Hare.
Hello, thank you very much, Lord Mayor, for letting me in. I'll be short and sweet here. Again, I would like to thank everybody who helped out, all the staff, the staff, but I'd like to especially thank the ones in the community hubs who were there. I spent a bit of time there at the hub. There's just one wee thing that I think we could do better in it. A lot of the hubs are, a lot of people were coming in who you haven't eaten for 3 or 4 days, and all we had was a cup of tea for them or a cup of coffee. In the future, if we could have maybe a hot soup and a roll or something that would help them out there. As I said, when I was there, I went out myself and got bits and pieces for them. But I think in future, I think we could have that, maybe have a think about that there and see if we could do something like that. That's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not sure who from NA is going to come in to... Okay, Peter's going to come in.
I'll just come in quickly, thank you. Yes, we were greatly appreciative of the Civil Contingencies Group for setting up those hubs, and particularly in Craigavon, and thank you to the Council for facilitating that. We were really pleased to be able to lend some of our staff to those hubs, but I think that's perhaps an area where there are opportunities for wider discussion at that civil contingencies level, because while we can support those hubs, we weren't in overall control of some of those. So we would be very happy to have conversations about how we can support that and ensure that we're providing the information and support to customers in collaboration with Council and with the wider civil contingencies group.
Thank you, Peter, for that. I'm going to bring in Councillor Paul Duffy next, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Very brief, just a quick question for Peter. Peter, the conservation volunteers, I've worked along with them in the past. They plant an awful lot of trees for yourselves, and the council has lost an awful lot of trees in that storm. Would it be possible for yourselves to link in with the council going forward, particularly in around Gosford Park, to help replant some of them trees?
Peter, if I could bring you back in. Peter, if you would just like to indicate to come back in, I can.
Sorry, is that you can get me now?
That's it now.
Apologies for that. Yes, that's something absolutely we're happy to look at. I can't answer the specifics of that tonight, obviously, but I will speak to our sustainability leads tomorrow, who have those direct contacts with the conservation volunteers, and we'll open that conversation and we'll come back to you on that one.
Thank you, Peter. Members, I don't have any further lights on, so once again I would like to thank the team at NIE for the mammoth effort during the storm and for coming in tonight to answer members' questions. It really is much appreciated. Next up we have the team from Fibrous, who will present us. A big welcome to Julian Simpson and to Mark Malone, and I think I'm now handing over to Julian then to present. If you could just indicate to come in, Julian, I'll bring you in. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor and Council, for having us here today. We certainly appreciate your time and are pleased to discuss our storm response with you and provide some insight into our business continuity plan. I'm Julian. I look after stakeholder relations at Fibrous, and I'm joined by Mark, who is the operations director for Hyperfast NI and the rollout of Fibrous across Northern Ireland. Storm Owen was categorised as a almost once in a generation storm, causing unprecedented damage to both electricity, which obviously you've just heard about there now, and the telecommunications networks across the region. Our response to this was the largest telecoms repair mission seen in Northern Ireland, and at the peak of the storm we had 40,000 customers who were without broadband. Of those, 2/3 were impacted by power outages that obviously we depend upon for the operation of the routers, etc., within the households, and there were 13,000 that were impacted by fibre damage to our network there as well. Our ability to restore service in the early stages relied very heavily on our colleagues at NIE for them to be able to restore their network, and also collaboration with Openreach to fix their infrastructure as well. NIE provide the power to fuel our network, and 80% of our build utilises Openreach infrastructure, that being the poles, the ducting, chambers, etc., wherever possible, that we lease of them to bring our own full fibre out into predominantly rural communities across Northern Ireland. On day one, we initiated our storm response plan and mobilised more than 700% of our usual maintenance team within 2 days. In fact, engineers were on the ground assessing damage. They later on that day of the actual storm, and we focused strategically on high volume faults to get as many of our customers back online as quickly as possible. And we were able to restore 5,500 customers in week one. Restoration efforts obviously continued apace, and we worked very closely with our partners, NIE and Openreach, with whom we had dependencies on, and relationships were very, very good there. We were almost stalking NIE as they fixed their network so we could get in and safely look to fix our own fibre there as well. Most of the damage occurred obviously in the rural parts of Northern Ireland, where most of our connectivity is via overhead polling infrastructure. Under Project Stratum, we're obliged to use existing infrastructure wherever possible, just to ensure, the efficient use of public funds there, to ensure that we could reach, as the maximum number of premises within the budget that was allocated for that. And in these areas, rural areas, the damage caused by fallen poles and trees was immense, including Armagh, Banbridge, Craigavon, Fermanagh Tyrone, Mid-Ulster, North Peninsula were some of the worst affected constituencies. In relation to our communication with customers, we certainly acknowledge that in the early stages of the storm, effective communication was challenging due to the dynamic nature of the storm recovery. However, once NIE restored full power, we had a much clearer understanding of the network damage, and we were able to share estimated restoration dates with our affected customers, and we kept them informed of changes throughout. We do accept feedback we've had from yourselves as elected representatives across all the councils and constituencies, and the feedback we've had from our customers that the frequency of information and a better explanation of what we were encountering on the ground initially could have been shared. Many of our customers, and probably yourselves as well, would not have been aware of our dependencies on our colleagues at NIE for the power and Openreach for their infrastructure. And as part of our review that we're undergoing, one of the findings, things that we will do and are discussing is that we will publicise this more clearly in the future, should there be any similar events. We absolutely recognise the inconvenience to our customers, and in particular, we understand, the impact it's had on those who've gone without for years, and it has been a successful project to date. We've changed a lot of people's lives. Project Stratum has the funding from DFE, BDUK, and DAERA, and for people's working arrangements off the back of our service as well. This interruption to our service to our customers was, whilst not overdoing, but in line with the values we have as a business. We have offered a compensation scheme, which was further enhanced for those without broadband after 17th of February. So, hopefully that provides some background to what we were up against and how our business continuity plan and how we endeavoured as quickly as possible to get our customers connected. And certainly myself and Mark are open to answer any questions you would have or ideas you would have for us going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian, for the presentation. Members, I will now open for questions and feedback. Okay, I'm going to bring in Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Julian, for presenting us with that presentation. I wonder if it would be possible, Julian, obviously NI just presented before you, and they had various statistics in terms of percentage of dwellings restored or customers restored within certain day and multi-day periods, whether Fibrus would be able to furnish council with similar statistics with regards to those repairs in our borough, because I think those would be very helpful for members to understand the process in terms of restoring as many houses as possible, because Lord Mayor, maybe similar to yourself, some constituents in the rural area seem to be without their fibres connection for a multi weeks period, rather than multi days. So if we could get maybe some of those statistics provided by Fibres, if that was possible, Julian, to be circulated after the meeting when those were gathered for impact in the borough. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Okay, Julian, I'll bring you back in.
Peter, certainly that's something I'll go back and see if we can pull those figures together specifically for Armagh, Banbridge, Craigavon Council there. So yes, I'll take that as an action and go back and see what we can provide to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Next, I'm going to bring in Councillor O'Hanlon. Councillor O'Hanlon, I think you might be on mute.
That mightn't be a bad thing before I say what I say. Thank you, Gillian, for your for coming along this evening. I have to say that in my almost 20 years as an elected representative, the worst customer service I seen was from Fibres. Whenever customers were without power, communication was diabolical, and even in the way the figures were presented from NIE, and as Councillor Lavery has asked, I know because I've written to Fibres on several occasions, and I believe you were copied in on them, and asked for that data, and it hasn't been provided. You mentioned that there was, I think it was 700% increase in your normal operations. So my understanding is from your own team that you had 6 crews out across Northern Ireland during the height of the storm. You waited until NIE got the electricity back, which in their own presentation just before you was up to 10 days. So, and if I'm right, the presentation that you've just said is that you connected 5,000 people back in within those 10 days and then went to the other 40,000 who were without power. In your own presentation, you referred to the fact that you concentrated on the high volume areas, but equally, Fibres is concentrated in rural areas. I have to say that I was completely not only disappointed but disgusted at the way Fibres responded to the calls and pleas of communities. In fact, I had one constituent who had just connected to Fibres the day beforehand, and whenever she tried to cancel her contract, she was told that that's fine, but it would cost her nearly £2,000 to cancel the contract with Fibres. I think there's a serious hard look at your organisation and your business operation if you want to continue operating and serving customers, not just in ABC, but right across the north. Thank you, Chair, or Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Hanlon. I'll bring in Julian to answer that.
Okay, no, thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll maybe bring Mark in on some of this here with regards to the crews on the ground, etc. He'll be more au fait with regards to that. Whilst it might have come across that I said we waited for NIE, I think Mark will be able to enhance on this better, but we can't go in to fix fibre on the ground when perhaps there's live electricity out there, etc. So that's really what we were referring to there. Originally, there were 40,000 premises out, but 13,000 of those, once the power came on, it was 13,000 premises across Northern Ireland, customers of ours, that were out of service due to fibre breakages there. And whilst, yes, we did focus on areas of high volume, but that was high volume within our network, and our network is in rural areas. So it would be really where there's a fault that we've identified that can take on, that if we fix that, we would hope to bring on the maximum number of customers. So that's really what I meant there by we focused on high volume areas there. With regards to that specific customer you have there, You might have run that one by me before. I'm unsure. Sounds vaguely familiar, but the £2,000 to council contract. If you can email me further detail on the situation with that at the moment, that's something I'll take back and look into there. Mark, I don't know. Would yes, you're happy to take to enhance on that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Julian. I'll bring Mark in.
Okay, thanks, Lord Mayor. Thanks, Julian. Yeah, just to pick up on some of the points there that Julian's covered, but and if I can talk you through sort of our first our initial response, you know, in the lead up to the storm, our normal continuity plan was set into operation. So from the Wednesday before the storm, we were already in talks with crews, with some of our other suppliers in GB, etc., to ramp up, as Julian said, from our normal crew numbers to over 700%. On the storm hit on the Friday, the early hours of Friday morning. And once the red weather warning had cleared, we mobilised. So we didn't wait for 10 days to mobilise. We were out on the ground from day one. On Sunday, our additional crews started to arrive, and we, you know, and I think where the number of 6 crews come from, that would be our normal sort of business as usual rate of crews that we would have on the ground, because we are a young sort of network. We don't usually deal with a lot of sort of faults, you know, that you would get on an aging network. So our maintenance team, you know, on a day-to-day basis is normally pretty small. So we grew that to over 300 people on the ground quickly in that first week. Through the first couple of days, and just around sort of Julian's point around NIE, we weren't waiting. So we hit the ground as soon as the red weather warning ceased, with guys out surveying, and I think our first focus was to ensure sort of health and safety of everyone, you know, on the ground. And you know, as you're all aware, there was a lot of trees down all over, a lot of roads down all over the country, a lot of NIE power cables down, and keeping our engineers on the ground safe was initially our main concern. So we had to survey cable routes with, as Julian called out there, with our biggest damages, and assess where we could make the biggest impact and get the most customers back on. That certainly wasn't urban areas, because as Julian said, our network is rural. So it was what cable faults, you know, were the best to target to allow us to get as many of our customers back on as possible. In that first week, we were up against a lot of obstacles from the point of view of, you know, the road closures. We had additional weather warnings. I think we had a yellow weather warning the very next day for icy road conditions, and we had the power issue with NIE, with the power cables being down. And it's one thing to be aware of, because I think we do get compared a lot to NIE's responses, and you know, with when you know we're a fibre network, it's a passive network, it's safe to work on. You know, if someone comes in contact with our network, it's not dangerous. Where on the flip side of that, you know, even working in the hours of darkness, etc., you know, we have to be very cautious that we don't come in contact with any NIE cables. So that's, well, it was a blocker. It didn't stop us going out and reacting. And as Julian said, we restored over 5,000 customers on the first day, 42 customers out from day one, 30,000 of those affected by power, 12,000 affected by actual breaks in their fibre cable. A lot of those customers didn't just suffer from the one break in the cable. That was multiple breaks along the route. You know, as we said, this was a storm that we haven't seen in over 30 years, and the amount of damage was massive. So, you know, initial surveys allowed us to point our crews in the right direction of where we actually seen cables that were damaged. But as we moved into our repair efforts, as you repair those cables that have breaks, and then you find that there's further breaks along the customer's route, you then come across cables that haven't been totally broke, but have been stretched and aren't visible to the eye and can't be picked up at a survey stage, and can only be picked up as we repair and start getting light down that path. So that's what sort of delayed our restorations. You know, it wasn't a one customer, one fix. There was many breaks along, you know, along a route, and it did add to the length of time to restore.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to bring Councillor Hanlon back in.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And to be honest, I'm no further forward, other than the fact that they've confirmed that only 6 crews is their business as usual in terms of operations, and it took to Sunday or Monday before they were stepped up. A wee bit of advice, lads. I think you need to go and take time and walk around the NIE centre and see how they responded to the storm and see how they dealt with customers. Because I tell you this, even if it was people like me and other elected representatives were telling your crews and your call centres where the breaks were, in around places like rural Madden, Middletown and down into Tynan, and we were ringing in, day out, and
Okay, Councillor Hanlon, you seem to have cut out there. Mark, I don't know if you want to come back in. Okay. Right, members, I don't seem to have any further lights on. Thomas hasn't indicated to come back in. So, members, just to finish, I want to thank both NIE and Fibres for coming in tonight, and I think you can really sense the appreciation and the passion coming from the members in your response. So it's crucial to have had that open dialogue and accountability tonight, especially after a huge disruption like Storm Éowyn. We want to see things improve for our constituents, and tonight's discussion is an important step in the right direction. Members, I don't have any AOB in front of me, so that includes the special council meeting this evening. Thank you.